Good evening. My name's Sandino Gomez. I'll be your host tonight for Voices from the Village, Community TV's long-running public affairs call-in talk programming. We have an illustrious panel here today, and we will introduce them all shortly. But the topic for tonight is going to be kind of focusing on violence in our society. As many people know, Santa Cruz has seen a recent wave of violence. And we're going to kind of look at that from a couple different angles, a couple different perspectives. We have folks from various different agencies here who are going to be talking with us about some of the kind of different ways of working on and thinking about violence. But before we do that, we're always interested in what you have to say, Santa Cruz. So we do have a roll-in segment prepared from Voices from the Street. And if I'm not mistaken, we're going to cut to that right about now.
This is Voices from the Village. We're in downtown Santa Cruz and we're asking people, what can we do to stop violence in our community?
I wish I had an easy answer for that. I think dealing with substance abuse issues and the mental health issues of people, and that would probably go a long way to stemming some of the violence.
Probably one of the reasons that people get violent, because they're bored in life. So give them something to look up to and stuff, like that they go out and play sports besides smoking weed and stuff.
I don't know, maybe organize events, gardens, things like that, where they have the opportunity to come and provide themselves with the food. They can come and grow their own little garden plot, and it gives them a chance to interact with each other in a civil manner rather than, seeing each other on the streets and having these turf wars, so to speak.
I think we have to, first of all, acknowledge some of the issues that are out there, such as poverty and homelessness, and try to deal with them. They're not going to go away unless we look at them. So
that's a hard question because I come from Stockton, which we have a lot of violence in the community. I don't know. There's just a generation of kids that are going out without respect for their elders, and it's just creating an atmosphere of violence. And
I think people need to be more proactive when they do see violence occur, is to speak out, not get involved, but just speak out and make people aware that what you're doing is bad behavior.
I think the culture promotes this sorts of violence, especially violence against women. You look everywhere and you just see these sorts of things, and I think unless there's a big cultural shift, I think the problem, especially with last weekend on the UCSC campus, I was in the middle of the day. You can't have, there are police around all the time, but in the middle of the day, that's on a personal level. That's about the culture permitting these sorts of things to happen, I guess.
We live in San Jose, in one of the outskirts. Just having smaller downtowns where smaller groups congregate so everybody feels like they own part of the community or they're actually part of the community, I think that in itself cuts down on violence.
Access to entirely unnecessary firearms for recreational or hobby or collection purposes. What on earth is that? And also the whole way that policemen bear arms in this country. I've worked as a teacher on campus. I've asked police not to bring arms onto campus. They refuse to do that. And I say, what kind of model is that for young people? You don't feel safe without arms. What are you saying to us?
That's what people had to say today in Santa Cruz. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you for those valuable words, Santa Cruz, and how poignant there at the end, that woman's comments about setting an example, because I think often here in American society we have, shall we just say, issues with violence and kind of resorting to violence, and violence as a kind of institutional response to social problems rather than, shall we say, addressing the causes of violence and looking to address those, which were also mentioned in the video. I thought the comments about the mental health and substance abuse, perhaps if we don't look at those as criminal issues and perhaps health issues, we could have a more effective response. But then again, that's just me. I guess I'd like to bring everyone else into the conversation here. Why don't we start across from me? Sitting at the table, we have Linda Lemaster. She's here representing Housing Now of Santa Cruz, and Linda's done a lot of work around homeless issues in the Santa Cruz County area for a long time now.
Yeah, way long, decades. Thank you, Sandino.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, for being with us. And to Linda's left, we have Carol Williamson. She's the president of NAMI for Santa Cruz, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What exactly is it that NAMI does?
NAMI is an organization for family members and people who are affected by mental illnesses. And our biggest missions are education, advocacy, and support. We do a lot of all three.
Great.
Thanks.
You know, Linda, I apologize. I should have asked you, what exactly does Housing Now do as well?
Oh, I was glad you didn't ask.
Uh-oh. Well, we can keep going if you want.
But I'll try to describe it a little bit. It's a grassroots organization. For a long time, it was affiliated with Welfare Parent Support Group, but now it's truly grassroots, and we have no, except for the occasional gift, no kind of financial support or administrative overhead. But the main thing we're trying to do is advocate for the civil and human rights of low-income and homeless people, and income security. I forgot part of our mission statement, sorry about that, but an income security. And my view is that there's a lot of different ways to get to there for everyone. We don't have to leave anyone out. And we do it through a kind of peer support and mutual helping model. And the important thing for volunteers who might want to work with this project, they're kind of often short-term, maybe longest is 4 months, that you gotta like people and you want to meet people that are different than yourself.
Okay, great. Housing Now, Santa Cruz.
Thank you.
Continuing down the line here with our panel, we have Rama, again, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Rama Khalsa? Khalsa, okay, and you are the Director of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services for the County of Santa Cruz?
Yes.
Cool, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's the agency that's charged with taking care of individuals with serious mental illness, and our other program is the one that focuses on addictions, and we get allocations from the state and federal government to do that. It's very challenging in these budget times, and I guess if I have any message, it's that treatment works, and we just need more access to treatment.
All right, show's over. That's right.
Oh, one more sentence. Treatment on demand.
Treatment on demand.
Yeah, no, I think it's true that we're being fed this message of there's not enough.
Right.
I think if we look at our priorities, that's quite a fabrication.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's my opinion. Let's keep introducing people. Father Joel Miller is with Calvary Episcopal Church, also known as the Red Church here in downtown Santa Cruz.
Exactly.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. I presume you want me to say something about myself?
Why don't you just...
I've been at Calvary Church now for a little over 6 years, and been a priest about 15 years. I was in the Central Valley. And I think the relevancy of me being with this illustrious panel is that we are very interested in creating a place of peace. Mm-hmm. That's what a church is known to be and should be. And so we try to be a place that people come to and say, this is a place of peace. And it's involved with the people that come. And it's a very diverse community in Santa Cruz that comes to probably any church, but certainly our church. It would include homeless people, it would include UC professors, it would include business people, and so we try to be a model of peace, and sometimes succeed more than others.
I wish more religious leaders thought like you. Let's put it that way. Great, well, thank you for being with us. And to Father Joel's left, we have Sandra Nichols, a former member of the Pajaro Valley Unified School District, as well as a current member of the County Board of Education. Congratulations, Sandra, on your recent election, right?
Yes,
November.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And
I was elected in November, and so I've been to 3 meetings so far. And I want to inform the viewers that I'll be talking about my own views, not the County Board of Education's views. I don't represent the board.
Right.
I do represent the people in my trustee area at the board table, but I don't represent the board in coming to the show, and we have the right to speak our minds as individuals, and that's what I'll be doing on your show.
Great, thank you. And
I was 12 years on the Pajaro board
Yeah.
and 31 years in the public schools as a teacher.
Wow. And you hosted a show on community television not too long ago, right? Or was that
A long-running and popular show
Yeah,
called Teachers Speak Out.
Teachers Speak Out, right? Yeah. So some of you might have seen her before in a different context, but she's here today. And you had a recent interesting discussion around gun violence and kind of a resolution regarding gun violence at the County Board of Education.
We did. We had a very, it was a well-mannered and respectful discussion. I'm really glad to report that because not all discussions on this topic remain respectful and civil.
Yeah.
But this one sure did. I requested that the board consider doing a resolution on student safety and gun violence specifically. And the board honored that request, and I consulted with some trustees from other districts and came up with a resolution that I presented. Now, my resolution was not approved. It went on a 3-3 vote. But there was another resolution presented by an attorney who said the resolution would pass muster in the legal world even better. And when I read the resolution, I was really relieved to see that the attorney had included some things that I had neglected to say, and I stuck in I requested additional changes, and the one that we came up with was far better than the one that I had written. And so I was exceptionally pleased. And that passed on a unanimous vote.
Great.
So that was terrific sausage making.
News.
Afterwards,
Never know
there
what
was
goes in there, but there it is, coming
glee
out.
that we had made the sausages and we had only gotten a little bit messy.
That's great.
Tofu sausages, I'm sure, we're in Santa Cruz, right?
Oh, that's right.
Or maybe organic grass-fed sausages. All right.
This was the messy kind.
Okay.
I wondered what the resolution said.
Yeah, that would. I'd
Yes.
like to know the content of the sausage a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, wait.
And do you have
Go
time
ahead.
to talk about?
Go good. This is elected government. Kind of inform the people, please, by all means.
Sure. As I recall, one of the most important elements was the background checks, universal background checks. And the word ban got inserted in front of the words assault weapons, so that made it into the resolution. And with the schools, we're really interested in having the mental health support services and the counseling needs to, services to meet our students' needs, and those items were in there also. It was pretty comprehensive, actually.
Congratulations.
What inspired you to take this to the board, if you will, if I'm just curious?
I was compelled to bring it to the board after Newtown, and I think some of the people that were talking from your camera on the street they were articulate about the issue of what we should do about violence. But in fact, right now there's a national conversation going on about what we need to do to prevent horrible tragedies like Newtown from occurring basically routinely. And since Newtown, 1,600 more people have been killed with gun violence. So I'm really motivated to prevent these horrendous acts of violence and the havoc that they wreak on our students and the fear that it causes. So I pledged myself to work on gun violence every day until legislation happens. And it's happening.
Great.
It's going to happen soon. It's going to be fully implemented soon, I'm sure. Because the country will not stop. They will not forget about this. I feel the country is amped up and ready to get some better safety regulations into our books.
Well, thank you for taking that position. Yeah. Any reactions from what Senator said?
I have a reaction, and I feel a sense of frustration in that it's probably easy to pass a resolution like that in Santa Cruz, but there are so many other places in the United States where it doesn't seem that that's the priority, the values, and how do you have an impact? There are some places, I think South Dakota recently passed a law, state law, that allows teachers to carry weapons into the classroom.
Right.
And Georgia, a similar one.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, but you know, you feel so impotent when you see that, you know, and so I think one of the questions is figuring a strategy of change, and that's always, I think, the issue.
People who don't want to do something are in a significant minority in the country, though. Even though Santa Cruz may be an easier one to win over to issues such as gun control, but in fact, approximately 90% of Americans want something done about and want to start with background checks. Make them more universal.
That's my understanding too, that background checks are a high priority. A large percentage of Americans want to have background checks, but not so many want a ban on assault weapons. And
more than 50%.
Not more than 50% of the Senate or the Congress.
Do they represent us? That's my question in response, certainly.
Well, one interesting fact is that after something like this happened in Australia, in Hobart, there was a huge legislative change related to assault weapons and background checks and concealed weapons, and it made a huge difference in terms of their violence rates going down. Because even if you can't control the isolated person who's doing something very unpredictable or feeling threatened, you can only hurt a very limited number of people if your gun doesn't shoot 50 bullets a minute, versus ones that we have out there now that are readily available. And I felt like their president did a great job with leadership, and we have to show our country that it's the right thing too.
Can I ask you, did you see how it was different for the people, the initial reaction of the people that this stuff affects?
Well, you know, Australians have as much of a enthusiasm for hunting and guns as we do, and yet they supported their president and legislature making this change. And they tracked, did it work in terms of the violence and the number of deaths, and they went way down.
They also had a buyback program.
Yes.
Or they bought massive amounts of weapons.
Right.
And they did a big deal about raising money for that buyback program,
Yes.
too, I was reading about.
Our gun lobby is so powerful.
Yeah.
They have so much money.
And just the entire industry, I mean, everything that they represent, the lobby, I mean, war is an industry and a huge chunk of our economy in the United States, which I think perhaps is part of the structural problem that really never gets addressed. I mean, I think there are much deeper issues when it comes to violence than, you know, any one of these topics. I think we have a great representation of different kind of areas, like, you know, government response, religious response, a mental health response, a substance abuse response, like a kind of grassroots community response. We have all these responses, but we often kind of use a language that is sort of already assuming some bad things, like should we have a weapons industry, for example?
Right.
In the first place, like should it be a multi-billion-dollar industry with incredible influence over our Congress, so much so that congressmen listen more to them than to us.
Right, that's my point too.
Yeah.
I just learned recently that maybe this is an average, but every congressperson has at least 5 lobbyists gifting him on the job. And it made me think, wow, that is a lot of stuff and money.
Yeah.
Maybe it should go, if we allow this to stay in place, to the people they represent. Not be a gift to who we elected, but a gift to the public or the people. I mean, that might be easier to
There'd be no
accomplish.
gift then, yeah.
You know? I don't know. But so what that sounds like on the surface is that the system of bribery, not just the gun lobby, but is what a good example, supports our empire's war economy. That's the main job. And even in our colleges, they're shifting and flowing toward, instead of universities' prime business being teaching people how to learn and making information available, it's developing technologies that further and keep competitive a war machine. And every time you hear Congress worrying about the economy, the next day they're talking about starting another war, as if these were distinct wars rather than just economic adjustments. And it's very frustrating, but what we can do is bound to be significant at a local level, but we need to learn how to do that better. People in general, all of us need to have the opportunity to learn how to negotiate, how to listen, all this obvious stuff, except it's not obvious when you're trying to do it. It's only obvious when you're seeing it on CNN or thinking about doing it. So I believe one of the biggest things we can do is practice. Practice not being like our congressman, for example, and not only doing things for rewards, but thinking about why is it important and who all are we working for.
I believe we should be putting a lot of pressure on our congressmen, all of our representatives.
Yes.
That balances out the pressure they're getting from their gun lobbyists.
That's a dynamic, positive.
I was happy to hear the statistics you quoted, because they're better than I would have expected.
Well, I'm optimistic, and
People
I
in
thought the
favor.
president's plan was just super, and the way he swung into action so quickly and put Joe Biden on the task force, I was really impressed with Biden getting the work done so quickly. Did you know that the manufacturers of guns are immune to being sued for their product? Did you know that? They have special immunity that other, like
faulty cars
or faulty drugs, bad drugs, you can sue for that. But you can't sue as a result of a gun incident. They have a special exemption. They're immune from lawsuits.
But
from what their product does.
Doesn't that kind of power make you feel a little despairing?
That the gun lobby had that much power?
Yeah, or does it, when you look at CNN or any news agency, probably worse than Fox, and you see the power that they have and the control, it's very discouraging,
Yeah. We have to be louder.
Yeah.
We have to be louder.
Well, I would like to say something about that, because I think I've learned something since coming to Santa Cruz. I've always, as a pastor, your role is an activist in the community, to bring about change in the community. And this is the first church that I've been affiliated with that joined a community organization, community organizing, COPA. So maybe you know about COPA. And it's a very simple principle. If I, as an individual, want to change something in the society, I have a very weak voice. If Calvary Church all decides they want to change something in society, it has a very weak voice. But if Calvary Church and Holy Cross and Temple Beth El and the Live Oak School Board,
dozens of other organizations.
Yeah, they join and they say, this is what we want. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, the individual and the family has a lot of power because they're united with other institutions in the community. Yeah. And I think that's going to be an important part of change in our culture and society in the next 25 years.
Yeah. It is. And I think, I want to acknowledge Sam Farr, who is our congressman, who has been consistently willing to stand up to the gun lobby and vote to control the weapons and violence. We need more Sam Farrs in other parts of the country.
I'll take a couple more Barbara Lees, too.
Yeah.
Maybe a few more Bernie Sanders,
Yeah.
That would be great.
It's like a monopoly game.
Yes.
Can we just clone Dennis Kucinich?
Yeah.
Dianne Feinstein at least has that assault weapons ban that is coming down the pike, and maybe that will be a victory also. I'm one of the citizen co-sponsors for that.
Oh, that's great.
And you could be one too, just simply by Googling it. Wow. Anybody can be a citizen co-sponsor.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. That is great.
You mentioned kind of the power of the gun lobby and the kind of immunity they show. It just reminded me, I thought I'd just share this. There's a fabulous film, John Cusack, wonderful actor, great director, and also a very passionate kind of social justice activist, and inserts a lot of cool themes into his movies. I don't know, early 2000s or so, they did a film called Runaway Jury, where it was actually about that, a case, a fictional case, but it was very much about trying to sue the gun lobby and the kind of power and control they exerted in trying to basically buy this jury. And it's, it's fiction, but it's very much based in fact. It's kind of interesting. Runaway Jury, it's a John Cusack film. Very interesting. I'm going to shift a little gears here, and I think we have some great perspectives here to talk a little bit about some of the violence recently in Santa Cruz. And it's an absolute tragedy that there's just been an increase lately, and I think as the community rightly reacts in shock, a lot of kind of conversations are starting and happening that I think perhaps conflate violence with some other social issues. I think there's a lot of scapegoating going on right now. I think there's a lot of kind of searching for answers that perhaps aren't going about it the right way, and trying to conflate violence with homelessness, or violence with substance abuse, or violence with the mentally ill, or violence with young people, or violence with people of color, or whatever the kind of scapegoating that's occurring. But I think there's kind of a conversation that's happening that's very concerning to me. And I guess the question and the point I'm trying to make is like, talk about this dynamic. I think there's community groups that are kind of rallying around this, and I believe they're misguided. And individuals and groups, shall we say, that are kind of trying to say it's all coming from the Homeless Services Center, for example. That's a target of this recent scapegoating.
They've been saying that about the murder of the 2 police officers was coming from the Homeless Service Center?
Not so much that particular incident, but that these social problems that we're facing in town, that by having the center there to serve these people, these desperately poor people that are kind of in these situations,
right.
We're attracting them, and we're getting what we pay for, quote unquote. Like it's the chickens have come home to roost. We've turned a blind eye to crime for so long in Santa Cruz that we're overwhelmed by it now.
There have been a lot of recent letters to the editor about complaining about the Keep Santa Cruz Weird motto. And I personally think that weird doesn't mean violent. And it's unrelated to violence. I think of the quirky people that I've met in Santa Cruz, and even some that look threatening when you pass them on the street. But when you stand and talk to these people, they're just like you and I, and a lot of them have very good education backgrounds, and they can talk to you about a number of interesting subjects. Being weird doesn't mean uneducated or violent. I think that there can be nobody who is in support of violence. There can be nobody who would sit here and say, "I'm not opposed to I'm not opposed to violence." It's just a bizarre. It's just a bizarre point of view that nobody really could assume that attitude. We're united in our dislike of violence and our hope that we can find more peaceful ways.
And that seems to be, that's absolutely universally true, but like, what does that mean, in terms of how we do that? How do we create a more peaceful thing?
There.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to set myself aside from this, but there are a lot of us who, when you put it that way, absolutely, of course, I don't support violence or hurting of any kind. And yet I may commit violence in my day-to-day life and not have even seen it that way, I might have dominated my children or pushed people around in the traffic. I don't even think that's violence. But that's the kind of thing my brain is doing, even as my mouth is saying, I don't support violence. I think that we're all born with that. And I'm not trying to say born in sin. I've been accused of believing that. That's a second different thing. But we are all the descendants, the great-great-grandchildren of tribal people. And most of this human history, the little spot of human history we've had on this planet, tribal peoples define their boundaries from other tribes through forms of conflict and what we think of today as violence. Perhaps, in general, more than what we think of as that, but we need to use something other than thinking and talking to get ourselves collectively around the violence many of us feel, whether we're the ones acting it out or reflecting it or having too much coffee or watching too much bad media or whatever gets us off our center. We need to remember that could be us. Even when we're talking about violence and bullets and blacking out in public, because it could happen to any one of us. And a lot of us don't even know that yet, but start reading about your brain and you'll find out. Yeah. So I think that compassion should be at the top of the list of practical strategies that real local people in any form of groups can support, at least speak up for, and find ways to begin, at least for ourselves, to be that. And I'm not saying it may not be very dangerous at times. There are angry things going on. We're all being sort of downsized at once. Imagine the energy that's going to take each of us to get out of the shock part of that. I mean, I can't imagine it, but I can imagine it's monolithic. And we're all inside that together. So we have to connect through some form of compassion. And I just read this thing, I hate to admit this in public, on Facebook that suggests that cuddling helps people not get cancer. I think, caring enough about someone to touch them on the shoulder, whether it's appropriate to do it or not, is something we're also all capable of. We could all, or we're very close to all being able to be that kind of person. And there are moments where it's critical and someone will get hurt if we don't. And some of us know that. We rise to that because we were there once. But mostly it's new to step into the action in a social system that as it too shrinks, is asking us to be more dependent, more trusting the stuff we don't know or can't see how it's changing, morphing,
Rama, you had some interesting statistics about violence and homeless people. It's certainly something we've dealt with at Calvary Church.
Right.
Because we have a dinner now between 100 and 200 people every Monday night, homeless people.
Yeah.
And, people come, they're upset. They may be going through some psychotic episode, drug-induced. And so they're scary to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But in the end, there's very little violence that they produce. And so maybe you could just take...
Well, I was earlier sharing that the federal government has done a lot of assessment of mental health related violence, and they are more likely to be victims of crime than actually perpetrators of crime. And yet, because the media, 75% of the time there's any discussion of mental health issues, they focus on violence, that most of the public associate mental health and mental illness with violence, even though that is not factual. And the problem with that is that when you feel stigmatized like that and labeled, people will not come forward and get treatment. Yeah. They see it as shameful. Right. And we want to have that go away, basically, and let people come out of the closet, and it's okay to seek help. Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't be ashamed to seek help for diabetes, but if you admit that you have depression or you have bipolar disorder or a mood disorder, you can be ostracized and feel like your life is over. And the more desperate people are, the more likely they are to do things that show bad judgment and not get help they need. So it's very, very important. And in the last week with this terrible tragedy we had with our policemen, several of the clients at the mental health center said, people are acting really weird towards me. I feel like I'm being blamed for the policeman dying. And I said, well, you aren't responsible, and it's just misunderstanding. But it hurt to even hear that from our clients, who 99% of them have no problems with criminal behavior of any kind. They have a mental health issue that's a medical issue that responds to treatment.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm a witness to, you know, the amazing heroes, the people that learn how to cope with a mental health diagnosis and go on and have great lives. And they're working, or they're volunteering, or they're contributing, and they're struggling with their brain not always cooperating and agreeing to take medication and volunteering for NAMI. And they are, to me, heroes. They've been through a lot of hard work, and so have their families. And so I'm very sensitive to the outcries and the assumptions, and you know, that these rare and bizarre instances come to represent all people that have a mental health issue, when there's so many doing so great. And
I'd like to make a little plug too, and actually because of Carol, I met people from MHCAN.
Right.
And they came to our church, and they just tell their stories.
And
MHCAN is Mental Health
Client Action Network.
It's a county organization, right?
It's a nonprofit that's consumer run from our clients.
So, in any event, they came to the church and they shared in an adult forum, an adult Sunday school class, and people were very interested in their stories. And then we invited them to come to our coffee house Bible study dinner on Monday nights. And so now they come every second Monday of the month. And they just tell their story.
Wow.
They tell their story about how they were trapped in paranoia and fear and schizophrenia, and they found some help through mental health services, or they tell their story of being depressed or alcoholic. And I don't think I can remember one evening where the homeless people didn't give them a huge applause. Way to go.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
You found a solution.
Yeah.
And that isn't seen, you know.
Right. Yeah.
That side isn't seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Media just seems to focus on the tragedy and the sensational, and if it bleeds, it leads kind of model.
Right.
And I think these great programs and these great stories, unfortunately, don't get out, and so the stereotype remains.
Right.
You know, mental health mental illness is a bad thing, and you're going to be in trouble for it. And I think it goes back to what Linda was saying about compassion. We don't have that compassion. People don't feel like there's that compassion. As a society, I think we really lack that. I think of other places I've traveled in the world, and there's a real sense of compassion, of like looking out for each other, that I think is just really, unfortunately, absent in a lot of American society, where people just, I mean, they do in their own way, but as a larger unit, you know, if we were an institution, I don't think we do that very well. We kind of, you know, we too often, I guess the point to finish that I'm trying to make is, too often, you know, if you have mental illness, you end up in the court system, and then the way they deal with mental illness seems to be prison. And there's a huge population of people in county and, you know, state or federal facilities that have mental illnesses that perhaps contributed to their arrival there. Could maybe anyone speak to that?
I could. I'm not usually very out about personal and mental illness, but I will. We're lucky to live in this county where the people that are setting up the services, to the extent there are resources through normal channels, are sensitive to the people who need them here. There's opportunities for the client, the consumer, the so-called crazy person, that's a bad word, by the way, to be involved in what unfolds. And also, like, MHCAN is such a good idea. There are client advocates in this county that are easy to find. Yeah. And especially when it comes to institutionalization issues, I try to make sure nobody ever has to deal with any of the system's bureaucracy, jail, court, whatever we think of it as, alone. That's one of the things we can do, housing now in Santa Cruz, is just be a friendly witness sometimes. Whether it's your landlord or a court date you're afraid you might not make. You know, some of them, including me, don't have a lot of other resources, but if you don't have allies, that could be the most important missing thing. Right. And so just the idea of the pairing of watching each other's backs, listening carefully, it really makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
You know?
We're in the midst of an evolutionary time of moving away from institutionalization, right? So community-based mental health treatment is what's developing, but it's not there yet. It's not enough. When you have it and you have housing and you have in-home support service and you have somebody to check in with, it truly works. And we don't want to go back to institutionalization, and we don't want people in jail.
Right.
And so expanding what is beginning, which I see as, thank God that people of California voted for Proposition 63 to bring in more funds towards mental health services. And as that unfolds, I think we need to push for and grow into more of the things we know that work. Yeah. And there's great things in our county that do work, and great therapists and psychiatrists, just not enough.
And another important piece is education, what we call public education. But I hate that word because it might seem like I go along with people who think the public should pay for it. And I hate to see something go through the taxpayers all the way to Washington and some part of it come back, and then we get to decide how it's best going to help a finite number of people in an infinite sea of need. I would rather that we figure out those goals as a community, whatever they are, include everybody as best we can, including people that know nothing, people who don't think there's anyone crazy in their family, for example, you know? They don't understand what it is they're afraid of. That's why these issues for them come together when they're afraid. So I think we need the public education in the sense of something we all need to learn about in order to make the problems and solution big enough for everyone. Big enough for people that have that label, and big enough for people that are worried or hiding or maybe have that issue. And big enough for more than just that family, relative, or hospice worker that has to take care of you when you're having an episode. Yeah. Everybody in town, everybody that's helping make this show, you know, for every one of us, there's someone out there. You know, for everyone that can go to a meeting at NAMI, you know, I can think of 4 or 5 people that are too tired when they get off work. How are they going to learn not to be the one that's bigoted about mental health issues?
Can I put a plug in then?
I see you holding something in there. Why don't you put that on the table and maybe you can get the...
This is our brochure, and
go.
this is an example of the programs, the many different programs that NAMI has to offer the community.
Wow.
And the most popular one is the Family to Family Education Program. And it is a 12-week class, once a week for 12 weeks, where a family can learn how to help their loved one. So by helping, supporting, learning, how do you help your loved one who's in psychosis or in depression or to deal with his doctor? The support under the family allows them to not kick out their child maybe, or divorce their spouse, because they begin to understand it as an illness and they learn how to work with it, and it's a beautiful thing. And then the other big class is the peer-to-peer class, where people who have a diagnosis teach others how to cope, and that's once a week for 10 weeks. And we also have support groups, weekly support groups, and we encourage anybody that has questions or needs information to contact us.
Great. And Rama, are there anything like similar services or other programs through the county that you could speak to that people might not know about that we should?
The county does have a range of mental health services, and they have kind of a walk-in access program at 1400 Emmeline from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, no appointment needed. Wow. There's an 800 number for the access team, so you don't even need a dime. I guess you don't have with cell phones.
It's 50 cents anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. You need 5 dimes.
Yeah. Where I do think we do have some real important needs is in substance abuse and addiction treatment.
It's huge in this area.
It's really a prevalent problem, and I think part of that is ready availability of drugs in the community, from marijuana to heroin. Yeah. And unlike mental health, which has Prop 63 funding, the alcohol and drug program particularly with these waves of new drugs like methamphetamines and crack, and we just don't have the treatment capacity we need. And Linda mentioned treatment on demand, and what we've found through the research is that people with addiction issues, when they're motivated, is the most important time to get them into a treatment program. You can't put them on a 2-month waiting list.
I was about to say, I've had friends in the area that's exactly what happened. They bottomed out and tried to seek help and found, there's a huge wait. What do I do? Oh, I'm just going to relapse.
Right.
That really is, I've seen that in my friends' lives.
And early in my career, Sam Farr and some of the legislature tried to pass a nickel a drink tax to have the money go to alcohol and drug services. And it didn't pass in the legislature. It was a very close vote. But we know, living in the community, that there are a lot of complications from alcohol and drugs. And that kind of resource redirection seems very appropriate. And that would be a great thing to put money into, because by having people addicted, they are not only victims of crime, but they're enlisted through their addictions sometimes to participate in crime, to feed their habits. And we need a more innovative approach. What we're doing just doesn't work. So,
one of the things I saw at this last year at the Homeless Service Center was a tremendous movement of public opinion to address the issues of homelessness. And it was largely because of the efforts of Don Lane, former mayor. Yeah. He gathered people from dozens and scores of institutions. I think there are 250 people at Cabrillo College to think about how to address the issue of homelessness. And there was one phrase, I think, that really captured the minds of everybody, and that was smart solutions. And they had all these speakers talking about what's worked in Los Angeles, what's worked in Philadelphia, what's worked in Denver. And if we could have something like that with mental illness and, have a broad base convening of leaders in the community and institutions that are concerned about it, I bet you there would be lots of people, and then we could present, these are solutions that work.
Yeah.
Jail doesn't work. Detox and jail, their drunk tank doesn't work.
The other saying I like is housing first. Helping people get back on their feet by providing shelter is the first step.
Sure.
And it's very scarce and very rare for people with mental illness and everyone else who's homeless. But the people with mental illness, to me, the shortage of housing is very sad. Waitlist it shouldn't be that long. It shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and folks often don't know that if you have a disability, you will get Social Security if you have an advocate who helps you with the benefit. But it can be as low as $675 a month. And in this town, you can't even rent a bedroom for $600 a month.
Small closet.
So you end up choosing between food or shelter. Well, no one stays well on the streets. We need housing that has subsidies or that lets a Social Security level that lets people live and not have to choose between food and housing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do want to let everyone know we've got a few more minutes left, and this is a live call-in show, Voices from the Village. You can call in and participate in this conversation. Let's see, March 10th, 2013. If you're watching this, you can call in right now. The phone number is on your screen, 425-8844. That's in the 831 area code, of course. You can ask a question of any of our guests. A lot of really great things said here. And I think part of the challenge that we face as people kind of thinking this way is kind of spreading this message. I think you know, doing shows like this, participating in these dialogues, these conversations, the project that you mentioned with, you know, Don Lane, the Smart on Crime series. I know that's been going on for a while.
And the
but
schools.
like,
and the schools.
and you know, the
prevention and early intervention for mental health situations in the schools, I think, is another important, building up the capacities of schools to identify kids that need to be referred for any kind of support.
Yeah.
You know, the layoffs that affected schools in the last five years, since the economy went south, have been devastating to the support services that help students, that help identify students in need of mental health services, counsel kids out of bullying activities, and work through problems with gangs on campus. I mean, there's so many ways that students used to be supported in our schools that have been eliminated, both by a focus on test scores as such a huge target, and then the budget cuts. Together, those things have decimated the support that used to be much more prevalent in the schools. And it's a travesty, and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a budgets. I can't remember the source of this quote, but budgets are moral documents, right? They express our priorities and what we see as important, and our values and all of that. And kind of what you put in is sort of what you get out. If you're going to fund prisons and police and the court system, and not fund schools and mental health programs and substance abuse programs, I mean, it's only it's designed for the results you get, right?
That's right. You've got to think about the future in your budget planning. Realize, what's going to build a better future.
Right.
Certainly, and just the kind of role that that violence plays, essentially. I mean, I think Dr. Martin Luther King, maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but the ultimate weakness of violence is that it begets more violence. It's a descending spiral, and that if we respond with violence through violent means or through institutional violence, it's going to perpetuate itself. We have, I believe, just a few minutes left, so I want to give all of you a quick chance to say, any last word.
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, just briefly, so anyone can get a chance.
We've been talking about our whole society as we feel it in violence, and I'm really glad to catch up on guns. But I want to talk about women in violence. We'll not get into a conversation, but think about, because not hitting moves us toward that more compassionate circle where we can learn. Not bullying moves us toward that. And these are things, to more or less degree, each of us can participate in.
Every mother, every father.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that usual to just talk to someone on the sidewalk if you don't know them, but we might have to start doing that, just so we can all get on the same page and feel safe again.
And it's great not to respond to these things in fear, too. I mean, I think that's kind of what you talked about seeing people and being afraid of them. And a friend's kid told me this wonderful story about seeing this guy who was all beat up in a store, and they were really worried, like, oh my goodness, he's all bloody and he looks homeless, and he'd been beat up the night before. Right. He had been a victim of an assault, and everyone in the store was like freaked out by him. And all he really needed was someone to reach out and say, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
And this tragedy came out, and everyone suddenly rallied to help him a little. But it's like that's an important step that doesn't always happen, and especially if you're going to be afraid and live in your assumptions or your stereotypes and not actually engage people.
Yeah.
Right.
We can share the dignity we feel with everyone.
You oftentimes, if you give it out, you get it back, right? Like it's
very much
whatever
so.
it may be.
Whatever it may be. Yeah. Any other final words? I think we got another minute or two here.
I just wanted to share one interesting thing that supports your point, which is Louisiana did a study of the people on death row, and every single one of them, they went back into their school records. Every single one, without exception, had truancy problems. So they were showing the signs that something wasn't okay early. And so our ability to have those support services and reach out to those students early lets us reshape people's lives.
And improve society by building up the rung that would be at the bottom,
Right.
and elevating that group by support. And you know, teachers are first responders.
Yes.
Because they
Hear,
see
hear.
what's happening in their students' lives that's causing a problem, perhaps with learning or behavior. And I see them as a huge part of the solution.
Without those support systems, the classroom becomes the class pecking order, and with them, it's a much more equitable learning experience. And I would think that would affect dropout, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And NAMI
Kids
has
that are happy in school don't drop out.
Or they can keep up, or they can function, or they know who to go to when their eyeglasses get
Yes,
stolen.
right.
Yeah.
It's just impossible for everyone to be an A+, but it's not impossible as we might feel it is when we're going through stress to lose a big chunk of the classroom because they just don't have anything in there that relates to who they are. We can do it. We can do that.
Si se puede. Well,
Se puede.
si se puede. I just want to thank all of you for being here and sharing in this discussion. You know, we appreciate it. This is going to be available online so people can check it out. You know, Linda, Carol, Rama, Joel, and Sandra, all of you, thank you for coming and participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to
Wonderful
Charlie and everyone.
service.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Cool. Yeah. So usually we just sit here and kind of like kick back and talk by the crowd.